Democrats say, you better fall in line or else. And they threaten them. And they say, you either do this or you're going to lose your seat. We're going to make sure of it. You're never coming back. On the Republican side, they just duke it out like Old West style. I expect any time, they're going to whip out their guns. Like, all right, let's do a draw.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So for people who may be newer viewers for your show, they may not realize like you were a part of like the Bernie movement too. During that time when Bernie was running, let's go to 2020, when he was running for president in 2020, did you ever think that Bernie would turn around and do what he's doing now, supporting Joe Biden?
No, I never thought that. I never thought I would see that. Same with Tulsi Gabbard. I did not think she would actually, in the end, say, I support, Joe Biden for president, for candidate or whatever. And then Tulsi at least didn't, she's done something totally different, but she didn't go and cave to the rest of the Democratic establishment. Bernie not only endorsed Joe Biden in the end, but then now he's like just part of the Democratic establishment. I don't even know how he calls himself an independent anymore. He's a Democrat, full on establishment.
Yeah. What about the squad? Did you ever think that they would turn?
No, I didn't. No. In fact, AOC, when she first got into office, what did she do? She staged a protest outside of Nancy Pelosi's office along with the Sunrise Movement. And we all just thought, okay, here it is. This is what we asked for. We want somebody to stand out there and really hold her feet to the fire. But then soon enough, she flipped and it was just in no time. And it was like, well, Mama Bear Nancy. And now the progressives, again, you cannot distinguish them from the rest of the establishment camp, not by much. Once in a while, they'll do something that seems a little bit outside of the establishment. But if they get reprimanded too much, they reel it back in. So they're useless. The Democratic side of the party is just completely useless, including Bernie Sanders, who's basically a Democrat at this point. They've all fallen in line. They've been brainwashed with the idea that, it's an existential crisis. And this is where it gets really insane because they now, 2016 and 2020, it's an existential crisis if Trump is president of the United States. We saw that in 2016, existential. We cannot let it happen. Then in 2020, it was existential. We cannot let it happen. And now here we are in an actual existential crisis under Joe Biden, right? And we now know what Donald Trump brings to the table. I'm not afraid of that guy anymore. Let him in. Let him in. He'd be way better than Joe Biden at this point. If it comes down to the two of them, I am voting for Donald Trump. And I've said this over and over, and I'm not alone in that. I would prefer totally different candidates than either of those two. But if it came down to those two, then that would be my vote at this point, because I do find Joe Biden to be he's an existential threat to humanity at this point, because I don't think he's running the show. I don't know who the president is. I think, if I had to guess, I think it's Antony Blinken and Jake Sullivan. I think they're the ones who are actually calling the shots.
We were just talking about this on Fault Line this morning, and I said the same thing. I don't think Joe Biden is actually making decisions, because he doesn't seem to know where he is. There's been a couple of public appearances recently where there was the one where he didn't realize the prime minister was the prime minister. This is really bad. And I'm wondering, who is running things behind the scenes? And it wouldn't be the first time we had a president of the United States that had an issue where it was actually someone else, FDR. It was actually his wife who was kind of driving things in the background. So
Reagan
too. That's right.
Yeah. So there's been a few that have started getting dementia in their older age, and their wives or somebody else was running the show. But it's not Jill Biden running the show. This is Antony. This has got West Exec advisors all over it, and that is the advisory group that was created. It was during the Obama administration. A lot of his deputy, the deputy undersecretary of defense, the undersecretary of state, the undersecretary. It was like the undersecretary of all of these different branches or different cabinet positions got together and created West Exec advisors. And their whole aim was to basically transition the military industrial complex to big tech. And they successfully did this. They got tons of Pentagon money for companies like Google, Amazon's Jeff Bezos, tons of Pentagon money went to these different groups. And so they have been, when you listen to the two who are in charge of West Exec advisors, that is Michelle Flournoy and Antony Blinken. and they co-founded this group, this think tank, because they're not lobbyists, they don't actually have to register, and they don't have to disclose their client list. They don't have to say anything. They're just advising. So they don't actually, supposedly, they don't make the connections, or no, they do. They'll make the connections, but they're not the ones actually doing the meeting for you. They just tell you what to say when you go to the meeting. That's different. So they don't actually have to register it. So it's a workaround. So they created this, and they got all these contracts for these big tech companies. And when you listen to their talks that Michelle Flournoy in particular gave, she talks often about, well, we want to move warfare to this over the horizon style warfare. And I was surprised she didn't end up getting named Department of Defense head of defense. She was definitely the one slated. She was going to be the one, if Hillary Clinton got in charge, then Michelle Flournoy would have been that person. But then when I saw Antony Blinken got Secretary of State, it made sense. And then they put in Avril Haines, they put in Jake Sullivan. They all came out of West Exec Advisors. So then it was like, okay, his cabinet is just filled with these people. And then when Joe Biden withdrew from Afghanistan, and I was very critical of this, I was sitting on the Hills Rising at the time. And of course, I had people, Ryan Grimm, definitely more on the left, saying that, anybody who was criticizing Joe Biden's, and he was talking for a whole group of people in that same mindset, saying anybody who was criticizing Joe Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan was actually a warmonger themselves. They're actually advocating for more war. But I knew, for one, that the withdrawal was just disastrous. You don't do a withdrawal like that. It's disastrous for the people that you've made promises to, and then you leave them behind. But secondly, I knew that the war wasn't over. They were going to move over the horizon style of warfare. That's something Antony Blinken and Michelle Flournoy had been talking about for a long time. And sure enough, what do we know now? The war in Afghanistan is not actually over. There aren't the boots there, so they can get away with it. But they drone the place, they sanction the place, they hold on their money. So they've moved to this new form of no troops, no boots warfare. And that's the new strategy. And they use big tech. They've militarized big tech, as we've seen. So it's a disaster. Joe Biden's presidency is a disaster because he has these horrible war hawks sitting in that cabinet. And I would hope that anybody else who gets in there would get rid of them. But, what we see with certain cabinet, with certain administrations that get in, and it's like Goldman Sachs is always in charge of the, always in charge of the Treasury. So hopefully that wouldn't happen again. And somebody would actually come in and clean house. But I don't know, it'll take a real special anti-war person, an anti-censorship person.
It really would. So it's interesting. So you would actually vote for Trump. And I asked that because I was trying to explain this on Rising one time as well. I said that, listen, some people who supported Bernie Sanders are telling me that if Joe Biden runs again, if it's Biden and Trump, they're going to vote for Trump this time around.
Yeah, I never voted for Trump before. I've never voted for Donald Trump. I will vote for Donald Trump this time around. 100%.
This is what I've been trying to warn people, because
and I'm not alone. Lots of us.
Yeah, this is what I've been trying to warn people. They're like, there's no way that Joe Biden is not winning again. I'm like, nah, I don't believe the polls, Kim. I don't believe that 70% of people want to vote for Joe Biden again. I think that number is a lot lower. I think they're inflating that number to make him look decent.
Yeah, 70% of people don't even want him to run. So, so how could they suddenly say, oh, but yeah, okay, I'll vote for Joe Biden. But they don't have, they only have two other options that they don't even know about, most of them, because they're not getting any press that Marianne Williamson and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. are even on the ticket. But they are climbing. Right. They are climbing in the polls.